So good evening, Tributaries of Eden, Parshas Behar, Bechukosai. First of all, I just want to thank Torah Anytime for putting up these classes online to make it available for people to watch. There are thousands of shiurim available on Torah Anytime. Millions of hours. Baruch Hashem, to make good use of the technology. So this week, I sort of owe the people of the shir a debt, because I had given a shir a number of weeks ago that was unable to be recorded. It was actually on Yom Tov, and in that shir I may have covered too many topics within a limited amount of time, so I would like to, if I may, go over that shir and cover more topics in less time in order to share some insight into the Yemei HaSfira, the days of Sfira, and what we're really working towards for the Yom Tov of Shavuos. The pasuk in this week's parsha says, you should count for yourself 7 years times 7 for a total of 49 years. And then it says, V'kidashtem es shnas hachamishim shana. You should sanctify the 50th year, which tells you that the 50th year is a special year. I think we got that point just from that line. The Torah then says, Ukarasem deror ba'aretz. You should call out, proclaim freedom in the land. L'chol yoshveha, to all its inhabitants. Okay, so now we know what happens on Yovel. It's the 50th year, and on the Yovel, we declare freedom for all the land. Then the Torah says, Yovel hi. It is Yovel. What does that mean? V'shavtem ish al achuzaso, v'ish al mishpachto tashuvu, and you should return each person to their inheritance, and each person should return to their family. So the question is, what does it mean when the verse says Yovel hi, it is Yovel? Are we just giving a name to the year? That's exactly how Rashi learns. Rashi says, let me read it to you inside. Ukarasem deror, you shall proclaim freedom, says Rashi, la'avadim, for the slaves. Yovel he, says Rashi, this year is different than the other years by having a different name. And what is that name? That name is Yovel. What does Yovel mean? So Rashi says Yovel refers to the blowing of the shofar, because they would blow the shofar to proclaim freedom in the land and to declare that all the slaves can go free. The word Yovel is actually another name for a ram, for a male sheep. And so Yovel hi means it's the year when we would blow the shofar made from the ram's horn. That's how Rashi translates this verse. So, again, you should sanctify the 50th year. You should proclaim freedom for all the slaves. And it is a year of Yovel when you blow a shofar from the ram's horn. Asks the Ramban, the halacha is that Yovel, unlike Rosh Hashanah, does not require one to blow the ram's horn. On Rosh Hashanah, we specifically blow the horn of the ram because we want to remind Hashem of the merit of Akedas Yitzchak, of the binding of Yitzchak, where Avram brought in place of Yitzchak, Avram brought the ram, and the blowing of the shofar with the horn of the ram somehow raises that merit of the Jewish people. That's only on Rosh Hashanah. For Yovel, we are not required to blow the horn of the ram. In fact, on Yovel, says the Ramban, we blow the shofar made from the Yael, which is some kind of gazelle or ibex or one of these animals. We blow the shofar of that, which means that the word Yovel is once again difficult. Therefore, the Ramban learns that the word Yovel, the actual translation of the word, means to bring, or to transport, or to transmit. That's another place where that's used. such as in the verse, Yuval Shai Lamora, they will bring a gift. So the word Yuval means for something to move, to be brought out. So it says the Ramban, it's a reference to the freedom where things are being moved around. Because when Yovel would come, all sales of land would be undone. All acquisitions of Jewish servants, even though they had their ears drilled and they stay longer, they go home. And therefore, it's a time of movement. It's a time of busyness, and that's why it's called Yovel. That's how the Ramban learns the translation of the word Yovel. Rabbeinu Bachye, in his commentary to this verse, quotes the Kabbalists, who say, quoting the verse in Yirmiyahu, V'al Yuval Yeshalach Sharashav, and into the primary waters he will send its roots. That Yovel refers to returning to the source or going back to the beginning, which on a simple explanation would be the word reset. To reset everything. People bought and traded land, and they went from this hand to that hand to this hand to that hand. And when the shofar is blown, the word Yovel means it's a start again. It's a reset. You get all your lives back, all your powers back, everything comes back, the game starts all over again. Everyone starts with the land the way it was when the land was first divided amongst the inhabitants of Eretz Yisrael.
Do we have any knowledge of the practical application of this Yovel throughout the centuries?
Well, they kept it as long as they were keeping Shemitah, we assumed they were keeping Yovel. So most of the time that they were in Israel, they were keeping neither. That's why they were punished. We're told they were punished for 70 years in exile in Bavel for the 70 Shemitos that they hadn't kept. 70 Shemitos would be close to 500 years worth of years that they were not keeping Shemitah. And since they were only in the land about 900 something years, so then that would mean that the majority of the time they were not following the rules. Which is difficult. But there was a significant amount of time when they were, and at that time they were keeping the laws of Shemitah and Yovel. I'd like to add a question here, though. Rashi says, Ukarasem deror, you shall call out, proclaim freedom. What does Rashi say? To the slaves. What does the Torah say? Torah says, Ukarasem deror ba'aretz l'chol yoshveha. You should proclaim freedom in the land to all its inhabitants. That means that everybody goes free on Yovel. And since very few people actually end up being sold as an Eved Ivri, how would Yovel be a time of freedom for everyone? Especially since the verse separately states that the land would return. So we're talking about the people experiencing freedom. What freedom is experienced by every person on Yovel? That's the question. And in order to resolve this, I'd like to go into a discussion about the days of Sfiras HaOmer. And hopefully this will bring us back to understand what Yovel is, as anyone with even the slightest sense of irony can recognize the fact that we are talking about 7 years of counting Shemitah, which is a total of 49 years to reach Yovel. We always read it during the time of Sfiras HaOmer when we're counting 7 weeks times 7 days in order to get to the 50th day. So I'd like to talk about, again, this is a Torah that I shared mostly at a previous date, but I'd like to go over it and elaborate and expand on it. The mitzvah that we are performing right now, each day, each evening, is the mitzvah of Sfiras HaOmer. It's the counting of the Omer. What is the mitzvah of counting the Omer? Because on the second day of Pesach, there was a korban that was brought. There was an offering that was brought in the Beis HaMikdash. We are meant to count 50 days, or 49 days, from that day, when we brought that offering, all the way to the 49th day, and then the 50th day, we declare Shavuos, and we bring another offering. The first offering at the beginning was an offering of barley, And then after 50 days, we bring the shtei alechem, we bring the 2 breads, we bring the offering of wheat to the Beis HaMikdash. What's that first offering called? So the Torah, it's actually in last week's parsha, the Torah says, Ve'eveisem es omer, you shall bring the omer, reishis kitzirchem, the first of your harvesting. Because as you know, that actually is the first grain that's harvested. We always offer the firsts to Hashem. The firstborn son, the first, we talked about this also when we talked about Arla, the first shearings, the first of everything is given to Hashem, or the first fruits are Bikurim. So in the same way, each year, we do not partake of the new grains, of the new harvest, until some of it has been brought as a sacrifice in the Beis HaMikdash. How much should be offered? An omer amount, which is 1/10 of an ephah, which is a certain measure. The omer is the amount of the offering that was brought. What is the offering actually? It's reishis kitzirchem, the first of your harvest. Why do we call this a carbon omer, which is naming the offering after the size of the vessel in which we brought the grain? We don't name things after their size, especially if size isn't the issue. This should be called the carbon reishis, or the carbon reishis kitzirchem, or the carbon hakatzir, the harvest offering. Instead, it's called carbon haomer, which is the measure of the amount of grain that we're offering up. And then, when we count, we call it Sfiras HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. Again, the Omer is the amount of grain that we're offering. Why do we name the offering after that? So, this is a very deep insight, but I'd like to begin with a Gemara in Ksubas. The Gemara tells us, Asida Eretz Yisrael Shetotzi Glus Kaos Ukli Milas. There will be a time in the future when the world will be in a better place. And when that happens, this is the, Kabbalistic equivalent of the Big Rock Candy Mountain. When that happens, bread will grow from the ground. The earth will give forth glus kaos. Glus kaos are fancy breads or cakes. They'll grow directly from the ground. In what way? In what way will bread grow from the ground? Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis teach us, quoting a verse in Tehillim, Yihi pisas bar ba'aretz berosh harim. There will be bread available on the ground at the tops of the mountains. Amru, says the Gemara, Asida chita shititamer kedekel. The wheat stalk will be like a palm tree. Kind of already resembles that shape. So it's going to grow like a palm tree. Berosh harim, at the tops of the mountains. V'shema tomar, so you'll say, well, what good is that? Yesh tsar lekotzra. How difficult will it be to harvest grain if grain is growing on a large tree like a palm tree? Talmud lomar, yirash kalavanom pirio, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mevi ruach mi beis genazav. Hashem is going to send the wind from within his chamber. Umenashva aleha, and will blow the wheat trees. Umashra salsa, and drop its flour or the fruit that's growing. V'adam yotze lesadeh umevi male pisas yado. A person will go out into the field and collect bread. Fascinating imagery. The wheat is going to grow like a palm tree. Explains Reb Menachem Azaria of Pano in his Sefer Asar Mamoros, a brilliant explanation. There's a famous debate in the Gemara, what kind of tree was the fruit that Adam Arishon sinned with? There are those who say it was a grapevine, that's why they got intoxicated. We talked about this. There are those who say that it was an esrog tree. There are those who say that it was a fig tree. But there is an opinion that says that the tree, chita haisa, was wheat. The tree that Adam Arishon ate from was wheat. And the question is, wheat doesn't grow on a tree. And the Torah clearly describes it as the eitz hadas tovara. In the middle of the garden there was a tree. The answer is, it's not a tree now, but it was then. Because at that point, bread grew on trees. Now, I've been asked this question before, how could bread grow on trees? And my answer always is that bread is the easiest fruit to grow on trees. Bread is simple. What's bread? It's flour, water, and heat. Flour already grows in the wheat stalk. The water is plenty available in the ground, as is the heat of the sun.
But the wheat stalk only becomes flour through human intervention in separating the wheat from the chaff and doing all the...
Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But the material is there. The ingredients are all there. We're going to get to all that stuff soon. So, in fact, what's more complicated is for an orange to grow on a tree. Because an orange has peels and seeds and separate slices, and it's got the inner rind and that stuff on the inside that seems to depend on how good of a peeler you are. Those shouldn't be growing on trees. That's way too complicated for the earth itself to put bread. Bread is simple. If anything should grow on a tree, it should be bread. And the answer is that bread did grow on a tree. Originally, there would be these big trees or palm trees that would grow out, and from it, much like you would see the dates hanging from a palm tree today, you would see loaves of bread hanging from a bread tree. Except the earth was damaged. The earth was damaged by the sin of Adam Arishon, and the earth fell 10 levels. Everyone knows the famous medrash that Adam was punished with 10 punishments, Chava was punished with 10 punishments, the serpent was punished with 10 punishments, and the earth itself was punished. According to some, the earth only got 9, because the other ones got 9 plus death, and the earth doesn't get death, so it only got 9, which makes for a total of 39 punishments, which is why you get 39 lashes. But the point is, though, that everything fell back 10 steps. This is why the halacha is in Shulchan Aruch, as is quoted in Shulchan Aruch, when you make the bracha of Hamotzi Lechem min haaretz, you're supposed to lift up the bread and have all 10 fingers holding the bread. Why? Because bread represents that original sin where man fell and we fell back 10 levels. And so we hold it with our 10 fingers as if to say we are not going to indulge against the will of God, but rather when we partake of food, we're going to do so according to the will of Hashem. And so we take it in all 10 fingers and we recite the bracha. Let's count. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, 10 words in that bracha. Those 10 words, with the bracha being recited with all 10 fingers on the bread, that is the process of correcting ourselves, of checking ourselves in those areas where we are failing to do the right thing.
So is that what Hamotzi Lechem min haaretz means, that the bread originally grew?
That's why. That's why it's Hamotzi Lechem in Aretz, exactly.
So why would bread be the fruit that you should not be eating? Why would it be bread?
That particular bread tree was the bread that contained within it the knowledge of good and evil. There might have been, as far as we know, there might have been other bread trees that they could have eaten. But this was a bread tree.
Shouldn't it say Hamotzi Lechem min haaretz if it was from a tree?
Because we don't have that. That wouldn't be true. It wouldn't be true. So it still has to be true even today, because it's still a motzi lachem in the arts. In fact, says the Shulchan Aruch, there are 10 mitzvahs that you have to perform in order to get bread. Those 10 mitzvahs are not to plow with an ox and a donkey together, not to mix other seeds. You can't mix the vineyard, put the wheat in your vineyard, that's 2. Not to muzzle the ox while it threshes, that's 3. Leket, shikha, and peah. Right, the bundles that are dropped, the shearings that are forgotten, the harvesting that's forgotten, peah, the end of the field. We're now up to 6, and then truma, ma'aser rishon, ma'aser sheni, and chala are 7, 8, 9, and 10. So there are 10 mitzvahs that you have to keep. In order, and that's why, maybe one of the reasons why the mitzvah of challah is specifically associated with the isha, with the woman, nida challah and Shabbos candles, because since the isha, she had her part in the sin, so she gets the 10th mitzvah of the mitzvahs that apply to the preparation of bread. Because Adam, Chava, the serpent, the earth, fall back all these levels, that's why, remember we said there's 39 punishments that are given? This is also why there's 39 malachos on Shabbos. Because the earth itself, the whole creation, fell 39 levels. Now listen to this. Of those 39 prohibited malachos of Shabbos, how many of them involve the preparation of bread? So you would think it should be 10, except it turns out it's 11. Let's count. Hazoreah, planting. Choresh is harvesting. Choresh is plowing. Kotzer is harvesting. Ma'amer is gathering. Dash, threshing. Zora, winnowing. Borer, picking. Tochen, grinding. Marakeh, sifting. Lush is kneading. And Ofa is baking. The first 11 of the 39 malachos are called Sidra the Pas, the process of making bread. Now, wouldn't you think that if the earth fell back 10 steps, that there should only be 10 malachos in the process of making bread? So here comes
that
the...
would only get you back up to even.
Right, well, that's what we do. The world fell back. Says the Ramami Panu a brilliant explanation. He says that there was one of these 11 that was going to be there anyway. And that's the malacha of ma'amer, gathering or collecting. He says, even before, when bread grew on the tree, and the wind was going to come and knock it down for you, you still had to go out and get it. When the man falls, how much man falls for each person? A omer. Because the word ma'amer means to gather. And so the amount that the people would go out and collect in the midbar was an omer's worth, representing that the malacha of ma'amer, of gathering, was always going to be there. When Adam and Chava sinned, they added another 10 steps for a total of 11 steps in the process of making bread. Let's hold on to all of this, and let's go in a completely different direction. There's a holy sefer called the Bnei Yissaschar, hopefully soon to appear in English, where he talks about the meaning of Vayivarach Elokim es Yom HaShvi, God blessed the seventh day, Vayikadish also, and He sanctified it. What does that mean? What does it actually mean that God blessed the seventh day? And what does it actually mean that God sanctified the seventh day? What is the blessing of Shabbos? Says the Midrash that the blessing of Shabbos is that the man, instead of falling on Shabbos, the man fell on Erev Shabbos. And that's the blessing of Shabbos, that its sustenance comes the day before. But how is that a blessing of Shabbos? If anything, that's a blessing on Friday. That means that on Friday you received extra. How is that a blessing of Shabbos?
Eliminated the work.
What?
Eliminated the work.
Well, it got rid of the work, but we want that's the convenience of Shabbos. Where do we find the blessing that's there? So he says, the Bnei Yissaschar says, what does blessing mean? What is bracha? Bracha is where something that wasn't there is now there. Related to the word brecha, which is a brook or a wellspring, it means when something is expanding itself, something is growing. That's what bracha is. Bracha means that you put in a certain amount, and it seems to be a lot more than what you have. You should know there's a rule. God created this world, yesh me'ayin. He said, let there be an existence, and the existence was. Yesh me'ayin, say the holy books, only happened once. After creation, it's always yesh me'yesh. Always something from out of something. No more yesh me'ayin, that was only at the beginning of creation. Afterwards, it's yesh me'yesh. That's why we say, at the end of the Kiddush, or at least in that first paragraph preceding Kiddush, Kivo shavas mikol malachto asher bara Elokim la'asos, that God created in the future to do, meaning that whatever is going to happen in the future was already here. Any blessing that comes only on something that's already there. You all know the story of the woman who came to Elisha complaining that she has this great debt, and Elisha says to her, tell me what you have in the house. So she had a small thimble of oil. So he says, okay, go get all the vessels in the whole neighborhood that you can find and pour from that thimble. And she kept filling vessel after vessel after vessel until the whole house was filled with oil. What was the point of the miracle happening in this way? Why didn't he just snap his fingers and her bank account had 8 digits in it? Why do we need this whole complicated process? And the answer is, because bracha doesn't work that way. There is no yesh me'ayin, something from out of nothing. It's yesh me'yesh. It has to be from something. And even if you provide the smallest amount of something, that can then expand and grow. But there has to be a place for the bracha to rest upon. This is why in halacha we paskin that by benching, you're not supposed to clean the whole table before you bench, even though wouldn't it be nicer before we perform a mitzvah that the table should be clean. You have to leave, some people leave a piece of bread, some people leave just the breadcrumbs, but you have to leave some of the bread on the table, so that the Birchas HaMazon, which is the source for bringing blessing down upon your parnasa, it should have a place to rest, it should have a place to expand on, because you have to have something there for it to expand, because there is no more yesh me'ayin, something from out of nothing. From now on, everything in this world is yesh me'yesh, an expansion, an extension of what already exists in creation. So he says, yesh means something. Ayin means nothing. Ayin is a state beyond our understanding. Yesh is existence as we know it. How do you spell the word Omer? Ayin, Mem, Resh. Ayin Mem Resh is the numerical value of 310, which is the same value as Yesh. When Erev Shabbos, when 2 Omers fall, that's a message of Yesh and Yesh. 1 Omer is 310, which is Yesh. 2 Omers is Yesh Meyesh. And when you can bring this level of blessing, which is what Shabbos is, Vayivarech Elokim es Yom HaShvi, God blessed on the 7th day, that through the seventh day, because of the holiness of Shabbos, that's the sanctity of Shabbos, because the mon doesn't fall on Shabbos, the mon falls twice on Friday, that's a bracha of yesh me yesh. That causes that through Shabbos, whatever comes on Friday should be expanded and turned into a blessing. That's why Hashem wants specifically, because Hashem could have made that whatever falls on Friday, for Friday, should fall Friday morning, and then right before Shabbos, Hashem could have dropped like we do. When do we prepare for Shabbos? 10 minutes before Shabbos. Why is Hashem preparing all the way on Friday morning for Shabbos? What kind of Torah observant entity that prepares for Shabbos that early? Look at creation. God created more things during the Bein Hashmashas than He did all of Friday. So the answer is because the concept, Hashem wants that the Yesh, which is the 310 of the Omer, and then the other 310 of the Omer should fall together to make Yesh me Yesh, representing the way that bracha exists in the world. Okay, now, here's where this gets complicated. If you look in your Siddur, you'll see by the counting of the Omer, each day has its corresponding attribute. Starting on the second day of Pesach, Chesed Shebechesed, Gevura Shebechesed, whatever each of these terms mean. But we know these are the 7 midos, the 7 attributes. Included within these attributes are all your behaviors. Every action which you do is either an act of Chesed, of Gevura. Hit the lights in the back. You could just go put the light on.
You're still recording. Might as well keep going if you can.
Right. So, each action that we do is an action of Chesed, of Gevura, of Tiferes, of Netzach. Each one, everything that we do, is one of these 7 attributes. But within each of these attributes, there's a further second attribute. You have the Gevura within your Chesed. When you are doing Chesed, how much are you limiting? How much are you controlling? How much are you balanced? How much are you active? How much are you inactive in your acts of Chesed? There's a total of 49 different kinds of behaviors. That's what we are working on during these 49 days, your behavior. But your behaviors only deal with the neck and down, where your heart, where your movement, and the way that your body acts. Really from the nose down. But what's happening in the brain is a whole different avoda. It's a whole different area of work. We call those in the brain, there's 3 more areas of work. They're called Keser, Chachma, and Bina, crown, wisdom, and understanding. That's a whole different area of working on yourself. Your wisdom, your understanding, your comprehensions, your contemplations. That's not the avoda of these 49 days. These 49 days we work on our attributes and our behaviors. The last of the midos that we work on is called the attribute of Malchus. What is the attribute of Malchus? Malchus means sovereignty, where we give back all the sovereignty to Hashem. We pronounce Hashem to be king. We remove ourselves and we give back all our actions and dedications to Hashem. That's why Malchus leads straight into Shavuos, where we say Nasa v'nishma. Why do we say Nasa v'nishma on Shavuos? Because Nasa v'nishma means it doesn't matter what you tell me, I'm going to do it anyway. That nullification of ourselves and of our will, that's the true fulfillment of Malchus, of sovereignty. If we would work our way up, says the Holy Zohar, listen to this. This is deep. He says, when the Jewish people first were ready to leave Egypt, they were on the lowest level on the realm of Malchus. They were slaves. They had no self. The bread they eat that night is called lechem ani, poor man's bread, because they are poor, destitute, and empty of any spiritual mitzvahs. God throws them to mitzvahs, which they fulfill, but basically they were not deserving to be saved. So the matzah which they eat that night is lechem ani. Says the Zohar, and just work with me here because we don't have a clue as to what any of this means. Says the Zohar that after 30 or more days, they worked their way up. That they were no longer stuck in this lowest realm of Malchus, but they were at the realm of Tiferes, of glory, of balance, of harmony. And when they reached that level, Tiferes is associated with Shamayim. All of a sudden the heavens open up and bread comes. Bread comes down from the heavens because they've worked their way up. Malchus, this is the other direction. Malchus, Yesod, Hod, Netzach. And then when they reach Tiferes, they've now reached a place, says the Zohar, where they opened up the channels of bracha to come down. They've healed those blemishes, those distances between Hashem and themselves in those areas. And then this flow of shefa and bracha comes down in the form of man of heaven.
What did they do to get there?
Focused on, contemplated God's existence, came to know God, followed Moshe into the wilderness, whatever the mitzvahs, whatever they were doing during those first 30 days, until the man, because they ate matzah for 30 days and then the man fell. Some say the man starts to fall on Lag BaOmer, depending on the calculations. That's why I said 30 plus days. But you're now going to have a number of weeks when the Jewish people are going to continue to work on themselves. And when they continue to work on themselves and they reach level 49, that means that they fix themselves on all 49. You know what happens then?
Return to the source.
Well, they now go back up into, past the attributes, into the level of the head. Now, I don't know if you remember this, a number of months ago, we talked about the fact that Egypt is called Mitzrayim, because it's the Mitzarim. It represents the neck, or the throat, the narrowest part of the body. Because Egypt is about cutting off the brain from the body. It's about creating that slave mentality where you just do without thinking. That's what a slave is. He just does actions without thought. Egypt, and that's our own personal Egypt, is when our bodies lead us to do things which our heads know better. That means if you do things that your brain knows you shouldn't do, but your body does it anyway, and your heart moves you to do these things, that means you're stuck in Egypt. You're in Mitzarim. There's a cutoff at the narrowest point at the neck, cutting off the heart from the head. Working from Pesach to Shavuos is fixing our behaviors and our actions and our attributes so that we rise above the 49 into the 50. That's why the Torah says to count 49, but then the Torah says count 50, because you can only count 49 right now until you reach and you fix yourself in those areas, and then you can tap into the 50th level. Now listen to this. The first word in the Torah is the word Bereshis, in the beginning, which the Targum Yerushalmi translates as Bereshis b'chochmasa, with chochma, with wisdom. In fact, we say every day in the davening, Kulam b'chochma asisa, God created the world with chochma. What's that level on top of chochma? Keser? Where is that in the Torah? The answer is, what's the first letter in the Torah?
Base.
The base of Bereshis. The Aleph in front of that base is Keser. Where is it? Where is that Aleph in front of the base of Bereshis? It's Ayin. It's not there. Because the Torah, which is the wisdom of God, the Chachma of God, is Yesh Me'ayin. The Aleph can't be there because the Torah, the wisdom of God, the Chachma, is Yesh Me'ayin. Ayin, the Aleph, which represents the crown, the Keser, is where the Torah comes out of. That's why the Torah begins with the letter base. This is a very, very deep concept, so I'll say it one more time. The Aleph, which is before the base of Bereshis, represents the Ayin, the from nothing, from which everything comes from. That's why it's not written. It's the from nothing. The base is the first letter of the Torah, because that's the Yesh, which is the Chachma, the wisdom, which is the beginning. So the Chachma from Keser is the Yesh Me'ayin, which is the Bereshis, the base, coming after the Aleph, which isn't there. That's why. 2 times Yesh, 310, 310 equals 620, which is the word Keser. Keser is 620. Because the Yesh and the Yesh, meaning now it's Yesh me Yesh, but previously it was the Keser, it was the Ayin, which produced. On Shabbos, we try to reach that place they're called Keser. That's why in the Nusach Sfard they begin the Kedusha by Musaf with Keser Yitnu L'cha. But Shabbos is about giving the crown back to Hashem. And that's why Shabbos is the place of the bracha, which for us, we can only get that in the realm of Yesh me Yesh. In the future, there will come a time when V'yitnu L'cha Keser Melucha, when we will give the crown back to Hashem. Maybe at that point we'll be able to connect more to that level. When the world was created, there was no division between your head and your body. There was no Yetzer Hara. There was no confusion of good and evil. Whatever was right, you knew was right, and whatever was wrong, you knew was wrong. You didn't have, like we have today, where we convince ourselves that wrong things are right and right things are wrong. It didn't exist. Which is why we were tapped into the mochin as well. We were tapped into the intellect. We were tapped into those realms of the proper understanding. We were fixed on all 10 levels. Along comes the sin of the Eitz Hadas and cuts off our heads from our brains. That's why we have to go down to Egypt. And in Egypt we live as slaves. And we recover from that. We come out of that, and we learn through practice, through working on ourselves, through working on our behaviors. We learn to overcome not just our false actions, but our false understandings. There's Chamishim Sharei Bina, there's 50 gates of Bina. Do you know what, this is deep, do you know what Eden is? Eden? Eden is the 50th chamber, the 50th gate. When you climb 7 times 7, and you walk into the place where your brain and your body are reconnected, where there is no confusion, that's what Eden is. The garden within Eden is the behaviors within that state of mind. Let me say that again. When we talk about the Adam Arishon being in the Garden of Eden, it's a physical place, but also it's a spiritual state. He was in a place where his brain and his body worked in tandem. They were working as one. That's the Garden of Eden. That is Eden. When Adam Arishon sins and cuts off his body from his brain, cuts off his behavior from his knowing better, when he does that, that is his leaving of the garden. He's no longer in a state of happiness and bliss. We think, I hope this isn't too heavy, Musar. We think that freedom, liberty, independence is to do what we want. But that actually is not the case. Because the whole world is searching for fulfillment of their wants, their needs and desires, and as much as they get, they come up empty. We've trained ourselves to want things that we don't need. Real freedom is not to have your desires fulfilled, but to have your desires balanced. That's freedom. To not be compelled by laziness, to not be compelled by anger, to not be compelled by desire, to pursue after things that we don't need, that's freedom. And being entrapped or enslaved is addiction and compulsion. When we are in a world where we have to have something that we don't need in order to function, that's enslavement. That's where our brain knows what we really should be wanting, but our bodies can't do it. That's enslavement. And so even though, of course, it's literally true that on the 50th year the slaves would go free, and it's true that the shofar was rung out and would declare freedom, but this is not just for the slaves. Ukrasem dror, says the Torah, ba'aretz l'chol yoshvea, to all its inhabitants. Everyone has to hear the call. You have 49 years. And in our case, we have 49 days. These 49 days, you're supposed to do a serious analysis of your behaviors and your motivations and your feelings towards your actions to try to overcome, not just like we do on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, where we feel bad for what we've done, we'll do better this year. We are working now to reconnect ourselves. It's a different kind of tshuva. It's so that our wisdom, our understanding, our mochin should be the same as that of the Torah and that of Hashem. That's the way it was before the Garden of Eden. Bread represents that knowledge. Matzah represents that knowledge. On Pesach, we eat matzah. On Pesach, we prepare ourselves to come out of Mitzrayim. We eat matzah, and we bring an offering, the Korban Omer. The Korban Omer was matzah. It was not chametz. Well, it was not allowed to become chametz. On Shavuos, we bring 2 loaves of bread, which are allowed to become chametz. Why would we bring chametz? The Torah tells us we should never bring chametz. All right, so we don't bring it on the altar, but still we bring chametz. Isn't the chametz detestable? And the answer is, you know why there's chametz in your bread? Because bread wasn't supposed to be open to the air. It wasn't supposed to be that I take little kernels and break them down into flour and then add water to it, where now it's susceptible to all the bacteria that's in the air, which will affect it, all the yeast that's in the air, and cause it to rot. Because the way bread was supposed to be was that inside of its encasing, it was supposed to take the flour and the water, and then you would crack open the casing of the wheat fruit, of the breadfruit, and inside you would have a loaf of bread unaffected by yeast. Because it was supposed to be that your heart and your brains were supposed to be unaffected by the bacteria in the air called the Yetzer Hara. And so bread and its state represents man and his state. Shavuos is when we fix that. On Shavuos we say, no, I can be better. I can adjust my ways of thinking to connect more to the Torah's way of thinking. And when that happens, you know what I can do? I can bring my bread into the Beis HaMikdash. I can take all my desires and they're all balanced, and now they too can be holy. The last Mishnah in all of Mishnayos, which we would say is the end of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, is that in the future, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be Hanchil L'chol Tzadik V'Tzadik. Hashem is going to give to inherit to every single Tzadik how many worlds? So the last Mishnah in all of Mishnayos, Shai Olamos, 310 worlds. And everyone asks, 310, that seems like such a random number. Why is the reward of tzaddikim in the future 310 worlds? But we know the answer. Because 310 is yesh. 310 is existence as God intended it to be. 310 is the numerical value of Omer. Omer representing the world where we don't need to challenge ourselves with picking and choosing and grinding and kneading, which is what our brains are doing. But we just go out and gather mitzvahs like we went out and we gathered the bread. That's the world which we're looking for. That's the world of Omer. That's the world of Yesh. That's the world of Bereshis. That's the world of the double blessing of the Man. And that's what the Korban Omer represents. That's why we name the Korban Omer. It's the Omer of the gathering. What should it be called? It should be called the Korban Katsir, the Korban of the harvesting. No. Now for us it's the Korban of the harvesting because we've messed things up and now we have this little stalk and we have to take a sickle, perhaps the most powerful representative of judgment in the world. It's a knife with knives in it. And we have to cut down the barley. We have to cut it down and do the process of kitzira, of harvesting on it, because we've messed up the world and now we need to fix it. Fast forward 49 days, and we're bringing entire loaves, shtei alechem. We're bringing the 2 loaves to the Beis HaMikdash, and we're saying to Hashem, we are ready, naseh v'nishma. Not nishma v'naseh, which would mean that after our brains process, then nishma we will do. Naseh v'nishma, we are dedicated that our bodies, our behaviors, our attributes are going to follow whatever the chachma, whatever the wisdom of Hashem tells us, which is the Torah. So we are reconnecting to the Yesh, which is the world of chachma, to the world of Bereshis, to the Yesh Me'ayin, which comes from Hashem, who is the Ayin. We are reconnecting to that place. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos tells us that when the Torah was given, it was given charus al haluchos. It says the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Why is it charus? Because ein lacha ben chorin, there is nobody free. El misha osek b'Torah, only someone who studies Torah. Is that true? There is nobody free? What about all these people who are free, who are independent? They're not. Freedom means that you are perfectly balanced, that your wisdom, your understanding controls your behaviors, and not the other way around. If we can we'll finish with this, if we go back to the verse, and we read it again, so this is what it says. V'kidashtem es shnasa chamishim shana. You should sanctify the 50th year. Meaning the concept of Kedusha, which is that when the 50th year comes along, you'll be elevated. Ukarasem deror ba'aretz, you should proclaim freedom in the land, l'chol yoshveh, to all its inhabitants. Don't only allow the process of working to be for those people who know they're slaves. Everyone is a slave. Yovel he, as we said, Yovel means to return to the source. Yovel means to go back through Malchus and Yesod and Hod and Netzach, Tiferes and Gevura and Chesed. And when we fixed our behaviors and our actions to ascend through Bina, which is when the world is covered with water, that's why women have a greater level of Bina, because that's when the world was in the state of, so to speak, in utero, which is when the earth was surrounded all by water. But going back earlier than that, which is Bereshis bara Elokim, which is the realm of Chachma, all the way to connect to Hashem, and that's where the Torah begins. Ayin is where Hashem is. That's Keser. The Torah, which is the Chachma of Hashem, begins with the word Bereshis, which means Chachma. On Shavuos, we merit, if we try hard enough, to return through the process of the garden, to undo the process of the garden, through the mitzvah of Omer, to climb back up all the way to the word Bereshis, when we can truly start to learn and appreciate and to understand what the Torah tells us. Everyone have a wonderful Kabbalah SaTorah, and the completion of Sfiras HaOmer, to return to Yesh Me Yesh, and to receive all the brachas that come with it.